Welcome to The Explainer. So, how does a single gunshot in Sarajevo spiral into one of the deadliest conflicts in human history? I mean, they called it the war to end all wars, but it did anything but. Today, we're going to break down that exact domino effect.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with pre-war Europe, which was basically a powder keg just waiting to blow. Then, we'll look at the spark that lit the fuse. Dive into the brutal reality of the war itself, see how whole empires just collapsed, and wrap up by looking at the lasting scars it left behind.
So, let's get one thing straight. Europe before 1914? It wasn't peaceful. Not really. It was more like a pot about to boil over. You had this continent just simmering with tension, split right down the middle into two massive armed camps. Honestly, it felt like everyone was just looking for an excuse.
And right at the center of all this tension was this incredibly complex web of alliances. You can see the two big teams here, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. Think of it like a giant set of tripwires stretched all across Europe. If one country tripped, the whole continent was going down with it. A small fight could suddenly pull in everybody, whether they wanted to be there or not.
Okay, but it wasn't just the alliances. It was this perfect storm of four big forces all feeding off each other. You had imperialism, countries fighting over colonies. That fueled nationalism, this intense pride and desire for self-rule. That, in turn, justified militarism, a crazy arms race. And then, those alliances we just talked about, they were the final piece of the puzzle, the thing that guaranteed a small fire would become a continent-wide inferno.
So you've got this massive powder keg. All it needs is a single spark. And on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, that's exactly what it got.
Right. So the heir to the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, is visiting Sarajevo with his wife. And in a moment that changes everything, a young Bosnian Serb nationalist, Gavrilo Princip, assassinates them both. This wasn't just a murder. It was the match that lit the fuse on that powder keg. It set off a chain reaction so fast, diplomacy just couldn't keep up.
And just look at how fast everything fell apart. This timeline is wild. It goes from assassination on June 28th to Austria-Hungary giving Serbia this impossible list of demands to a declaration of war. Then Russia jumps in to back up Serbia. That pulls Germany in. Germany declares war on Russia and France. And then when Germany plows through neutral Belgium to get to France, Britain has no choice but to declare war. It took just over a month for a regional crisis to become a full-blown European war. That's the domino effect in action.
But here's the craziest part. While all this high-stakes diplomacy is failing, what's the average person doing? Well, this quote says it all. In Vienna, the heart of the empire whose heir was just killed, it almost failed to make any impression whatsoever. People were just going about their lives, as if nothing happened. They had absolutely no idea that the world was about to be turned upside down.
Okay, so the war is on. And the crazy thing is, most people thought it would be a short, glorious adventure. You know, home by Christmas was the popular saying. Well, that optimism was about to collide head-on with a brutal, horrific new reality.
And this is what that new reality looked like. Trench warfare. Forget heroic cavalry charges. We're talking about millions of men stuck in miles of muddy, rat-infested ditches. And in between the two sides, that was no man's land. A nightmarish wasteland of barbed wire, shell craters, and constant death. Huge, bloody battles were fought, costing insane numbers of lives, all to maybe gain a few feet of that ground. It was hell on earth.
See, Germany had a plan for that home by Christmas idea. It was called the Schlieffen Plan. The whole thing was about speed. Smash through Belgium, knock France out of the war super fast, like in 6 weeks, and then turn around to deal with the slower-moving Russians. But it didn't work. The French and British stopped them just outside Paris. And when that plan failed, the dream of a quick victory was over. The war of movement became a war of grinding attrition. It is almost impossible to wrap your head around the scale of the killing. Just look at this number. 57,500. That's not the total for a battle. That's the number of British casualties on the first day of the Battle of the Somme. The single worst day in the entire history of the British Army. It's just staggering.
So this immense strain, this total war, it didn't just kill a generation of young men. It broke the world they lived in. It completely shattered the old order, toppled empires that had lasted for centuries, and literally redrew the map of the world.
I mean, just think about this. We're talking about four massive ancient empires gone.
The Russian Empire, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, all of them just vanished. These weren't just countries, they were dynasties that had ruled for hundreds of years. The war was like a political earthquake that just leveled the entire landscape.
But out of all that destruction, something new began to grow. From the ashes of those old empires, a whole new map of Europe was drawn. You see new countries popping up like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, all based on this idea of self-determination. The entire political face of the continent was changed forever.
And the financial cost was just as devastating. Take a look at this. Countries like Germany and Britain spent 60% of their entire national GDP on the war. 60%! That's just an insane amount of money. It left them with crippling debt and massive inflation, creating economic chaos that haunted them for years to come.
So, the guns finally fell silent on November 11th, 1918. The war was over. But the peace they created, well, it was anything but peaceful. In fact, it was so deeply flawed that it basically just planted the seeds for the next, even deadlier war.
The main peace treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, wasn't really about healing. For Germany, it felt like pure punishment. They lost land, their military was gutted, and this is the big one. They were forced to sign a war guilt clause, taking all the blame and agreeing to pay billions in reparations. This humiliation created this deep, toxic resentment in Germany that would have devastating consequences down the road.
And let's not forget the human cost, which is just beyond comprehension. Around 40 million people, soldiers and civilians, killed or wounded. An entire generation was scarred or wiped out. They called them the lost generation for a reason. It fundamentally broke and reshaped society.
Which brings us back to the ultimate tragic irony. It was supposed to be the war to end all wars. So how on earth did it become the direct prelude to World War II, an even bigger catastrophe just 2 decades later? The answer really is that the First War never truly ended. Its ghosts just lingered, waiting for their chance to return.